Welcome to The Business Strategist, the show for CEOs and founders ready to scale fast, lead smarter, and build a business that doesn't rely on them. I'm Adam Strong, award-winning strategist, former elite athlete, international speaker, and 3 times best-selling author. After 3 decades in business, I know exactly what it takes to grow, scale, and exit with impact. Each week, I dive into real conversations with industry experts, bold entrepreneurs, and clients navigating the uphill struggles of business, giving you the tools and the strategies to create more profit, more freedom, and more impact. Let's get into it. How would you like to create your own boardroom of trusted advisors for your business? And how would you like to get onto other people's boards so that you can enhance your credibility and influence? Well, today is your lucky day because we have the amazing Callum Laing with me. And if you don't know who Callum is, Callum has been in the game, the entrepreneurial game, for the best part of around 25 years. So he's got a little bit of experience, and he's built and scaled multiple different businesses in different sectors, private sector, the public sector. He has served as an ambassador at a high commissioner, ambassador for the Angel Forum, high commissioner to Singapore. He's the author of 3 books. Now 4 books, 3 of them are bestsellers. The 4th book he just came out called The Boardroom Blueprint. So first of all, we're going to be talking a little bit about how Callum got into this industry of the boardroom. So what gaps did he identify that's missing for leaders and small businesses? We're going to be talking a little bit about that. We're also going to be talking about some of the most common myths that tend to come up when it comes to creating your own board or getting on other people's boards. But also, the most exciting part of today's episode is Callum is going to be coaching me. And he's going to be coaching me about how I can create my own board or potentially get on other people's boards, which hopefully is going to give you some real big, massive value bombs. In fact, I know it will. So make sure you got your pens and paper handy, ladies and gents. Callum, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Pressure's on me now, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely, really good to have you here. And you know, we've had some fun conversations offline, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Have to admit that. Love a great conversation. Just give us some context, Callum, because listen, I mean, we're both seasoned entrepreneurs. We've been in the game for a long time. You live in Singapore, which is an amazing place to live in, by the way. And I just want to kind of give the audience, some of our listeners, about how you got to where you were today. How did you get into the whole kind of boardroom, scenario? What gaps did you identify that was missing for leaders and small business? I'd love to start with that.
Yeah, so it's been a really smooth, easy journey, as you'd imagine. Nothing has gone wrong at all, and it's all been very straightforward. That's exactly what I was doing when I was a kid. So look, I started in entrepreneurship as a kid, just hustling to make money on various little enterprises. And then at the height of the .com boom, I set up a recruitment agency putting tech engineers into telcos around Europe, which was very successful, which of course I thought was down to me and not the fact I was in a massive bubble. And then when the bubble burst, I discovered I wasn't quite as talented as I thought I was. But that kind of sort of turned me into an entrepreneur good and proper in that nobody else would hire me after that. So I've been in this game ever since. I've been out in Asia for about 20 plus years now, 23, 24 years.
Wow.
Which was basically because I was looking at the macro trends and all the different macro trends as a young entrepreneur. And I realized one of the ones that was quite prominent was that there was the largest transfer of wealth in history from west to east. And so as a young entrepreneur, it just made sense to be on the receiving end of that equation rather than the giving end. And yeah, I've been out here ever since, done a whole bunch of things, set up various businesses, and been in Singapore for the last 12 years. And for about the last decade, I've been working in the kind of intersection between small business and the public markets. So putting together groups of companies, taking them public, leaving the founders in control. I'm a huge fan of small businesses. Never been particularly excited by the startup space. It gets a disproportionate amount of PR, but actually doesn't contribute a huge amount to the economy. Never really been interested in that sort of 200 million and above, which is sort of where private equity and others
Yep.
play. But that gap in the middle is half the world's economy, and it's pouring small businesses, a lot of which are kind of 20 years old, profitable, cash generating. They're not sexy enough for VC. They're too small for private equity. And there's no financial product to connect sophisticated capital with the people that actually create the value in the world. And so that's kind of the space that I've been playing in with my business partner, Jeremy Harbour, in this venture, who some of your listeners might be familiar with. So we've been putting together groups of companies, taking them public. And then as a byproduct of that, obviously I was getting to sit on various boards and started to learn about that, which was kind of interesting because when I was a young entrepreneur, I always thought I want to sit on somebody else's board, like that prestige of sitting on the board of another company and only doing a few hours work a month and everything that goes with that. And that they always struck me as being these incredibly sophisticated, talented people that, the board's flying in. We've got to get these presentations ready. And then I started sitting on boards and was a little bit underwhelmed by what I saw. But I also saw that there was a huge gap, and there was a lot of people that were on boards that probably shouldn't be on boards, and there was a lot of people being overlooked for boards because they didn't fit a particular image, gender or race or whatever, were being overlooked, or entrepreneurs weren't getting a look in. And actually, that diversity was critically important. It was overlooked talent, and as an entrepreneur, I hate overlooked talent. It's a waste of resource. So that kind of led to, well, hang on, maybe there's an opportunity here to reconnect those the value and the boards. And so one of the statistics that has really stood out to me is there's 330 million businesses in the world, and it doesn't include non-profits or sporting organizations or anything else. 330 million businesses in the world. Less than 1% of them have an active board. And yet, every single successful company you can think of has an active board. So there's clearly something missing there, which creates a huge opportunity, and that kind of led to the book and everything else.
Interesting. Have you found that that there is a real difference between the way we do business in Asia and the way we do business in Western worlds? Have you seen there any kind of similar patterns, but also any kind of disproportions when dealing with, like high net worth individuals, investors, people like that?
Yeah, I think, look, every country you go to has differences and things that make them unique and challenging and exciting. What you kind of, whenever you go to a new country, whatever stands out is the differences. So I moved I was living in Amsterdam in Holland. I moved to Thailand, which is a very pragmatic country. The Dutch are very pragmatic and matter of fact. And then I moved to Thailand, where it's all about saving face and smile and say yes, even if that's not what they mean. So that was a big cultural shock. And then moving from Thailand to Singapore, where you're again quite pragmatic and very ambitious and driven. What you kind of realize is that actually those differences are relatively small in the scheme of things. Businesses are fundamentally the same the world over. I think, there's countries like America which are a little bit more opportunistic. So if they can see the value in something, they will press the trigger literally straight away. Whereas in Asia, it takes a little bit longer to build the trust. So there's a few differences like that. But overall, you find kind of businesses are businesses, and if you can help them grow, you're of value to them.
Yeah, very good. Love it. Talk to me a little bit about, some of the common myths when it comes to, creating your own board and getting onto others? Because I think, we talked about this offline, and you absolutely cracked me up when we talked about it, which was, so there is an organization in the UK, and I'm not going to name them and shame them, of course, but they do non-executive director courses, okay? And the big, and that's kind of like, from my perspective, that was what we needed to do in order to be recognized as a qualified board member, whatever that means, of course. But then you said, oh no, that's absolute BS. Let's talk about that a little bit, because again, maybe our listeners will kind of resonate with me on this, but I thought that you had to do like some special course or get a certification with regards to getting on some people's boards or whatever it is, to be recognized as hitting the criteria, Callum, should we say? Any thoughts?
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that, because I think since our last conversation, somebody tried to connect with me on LinkedIn, and in their profile, they said that they were a nationally certified entrepreneur. And I thought,
What?
if you have to say you've got a certification, by definition, you're not an entrepreneur.
That's crazy. Really, oh my God.
This whole idea about getting certified for stuff. Look, I think it is a very common misconception, and it's a great marketing tool for these companies, is to say, get certified and you'll get a board seat. And I think there's a couple of things that are really critical to this. The first thing is, generally what they teach is best practice good corporate governance. Now, best practice good corporate governance is what the big universities look at the S&P 500 companies and declare this is good corporate governance, which is fantastic, except that it's completely irrelevant for 99% of companies, because 99% of companies are not those giant behemoths. And
right,
and hopefully your audience know that if you tried to apply best practice good corporate governance to a small business, you'd absolutely destroy it. You would kill it. And so, first of all, what they're teaching might be of interest if you like that kind of thing. It's just not relevant to most businesses. The second piece is that, let's say that your ambition is to get a board seat on one of those big companies. First of all, we'll get into later why they're not going to accept you. But even if they did, no one in the history of boards anywhere has ever sat there and gone, you know what we need? We need someone with more certificates. It's just not what it's not what they're looking for. They're looking for people that can add value. And those bigger companies, more than any other company, are the ones that don't need the certificates. They've got reams of lawyers and advisors, and the stock markets themselves give them advisors so that they don't cross any line. It's so ridiculous and has become so entrenched in the mindset that you kind of, when you realize it, you're sort of like, what is going on? I set up a program about 18 months ago, the Veblen Director Program, to train people, and it really was about saying, look, that's nonsense. And a lot of our members have actually gone out, paid quite a lot of money for these certificates, and discovered that, funnily enough, boards haven't come knocking on their doors wanting them. So,
Callum, I want a certificate. Do I get? I want more certificates in my life, please. Can I have one?
We do actually. We get quite a lot of our members ask for it, and our premise is, look, if you join our program, if you get accepted onto the program, we guarantee you a board seat. We're so confident of what we can do, and they still say, can I get a certificate? What? You've got a board seat. A board seat is far better than a certificate. But yes, I'll scribble on a post-it note or something.
The world has gone mad. The world has gone absolutely bonkers. Anyway, moving on from certificates, and we shouldn't take the mickey. We really shouldn't. Anyway, some really good, valid points there. I love that you feel like there was this lack of relevance and corporate governance and best practice. Because I think you're right. I feel like obviously from the outset as well. It's kind of feels like with boards in particular is that they're only for big companies. Like they're not. You can't apply it to smaller companies. You're saying the latter, of course, but then my first initiation or perception or reality was, okay, well, I can go and get my certificate and try to fit within the box of getting on a Fortune 500 company board, but they're probably not likely to come knocking on my door because I've got no experience, right? So I suppose I've got to throw that thing out the window, right?
Yeah, exactly. And look, this is if you have ever attempted to get a board seat, with that with that very small number of companies that actually have boards and the very small amount of them that actually advertise, and assuming they are real board seats as opposed to just recruitment companies trying to honeypot your CV, then yeah, they're going to reject you because you haven't got board experience. And so you're back to that sort of the beginning of your career thing of, hang on, how do I get work experience without work experience? And so that's kind of the everything that we do and have put together is really about kind of creating a Trojan horse to build that experience and build the connections with the right people so that you can get those board seats. Because ultimately, whatever size company, or certainly those bigger ones, they're not going to hire you unless they know you, like you, trust you. You've been recommended by somebody they know and like and trust. The idea of looking at a CV and then going, oh yeah, we'll hire this person, it just doesn't happen.
I spoke at the very beginning about potentially getting on a board, that it could potentially enhance your credibility and your influence. But what are the other kind of benefits to potentially sitting on a board, and how does that compare to maybe other methods that could be used to, I don't know, create an impact or building on personal branding and stuff like that? What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, look, I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's interesting that if I was to lose everything, probably the first thing I would try and do is find a way to add enough value to be added to a board, because it's the connection. So A, it can be incredibly lucrative. B, you get to sit in a room with, virtually or in person, with some incredibly smart people that are looking at businesses in a holistic way. You do get you definitely get insights into industry and businesses that you just don't get otherwise. So it's incredibly valuable from that perspective. It does infer a huge amount of credibility, rightly or wrongly. I joke about the fact that on Instagram, driving a Lambo and having a nice watch gives you all the credibility, but on LinkedIn, which is ultimately where we need to be, the ultimate status flex is saying, hey, I've just joined the board of XYZ company. And so it does infer that credibility. And look, entrepreneurial business in general is all about trust. So anything that you can do to fast track trust with people, and sitting on the board of a company is a great way. And it's why I think, I talk about why, and we'll get on to why I think small businesses should have boards, but I also genuinely think that entrepreneurs should sit on the boards of companies. And of course, the normal argument is, yeah, hang on, look, I'm already working 24/7. I haven't got the time to sit on somebody else's company. But apart from the credibility it gives you with your clients, with your staff, with investors, that, not only you're an entrepreneur, you're sitting on boards of other companies. When we're an entrepreneur, we get so mono-focused on all the fires that we have to put out in our own business, and we're convinced that all the problems are unique to our business. And when we look at other companies, they all seem to be working perfectly. And so, your business is held together with chicken wire and masking tape, but when you go and sit on the board of somebody else's company, not only do you see that also they've got a few challenges, but you see how they've fixed certain challenges, how they're dealing with those things, which is really useful. I remember when I was a young entrepreneur and just kind of sitting in my office alone at the weekend going, I don't know how this works. How do I get money from a customer's hand into my pocket? I just didn't know. Um, and just thinking, God, I'd love to just go and sit on a grown-up business's board and try and get that learning that I've sort of missed out on. So yeah, I think there's huge value for entrepreneurs in sitting on other people's boards.
Very good. Love it. Some good stuff. What, in terms of your first experience in getting on your first board for yourself, what was your initial feeling with regards to when that opportunity arose, for example? Like what was you feeling at the time? What was you kind of expecting? And did it match your expectations? Did it was you completely underwhelmed rather than overwhelmed? Tell me about your feelings and experience in regards to your first board.
Well, one of the things that you learn quickly is that boards are very different. You can have very smart boards and you can have boards that are aspiring to be smart. I think my first kind of realization of how weird the system was is when we were taking a company public, and it was the first company we had taken public, and we put together our board to present to the investment bank, which is the gatekeepers to the stock exchange, and it was who we wanted on the board. It was global entrepreneurs like us, people that could help us take the board to the next level. And we got so much pushback from the investment bank that said, no, you can't do that. Investors need to see that you've got some old gray hairs on the board. You need people on there with like 10 to 20 years experience. Nothing against people with gray hair, but I'm just jealous.
Or we don't have any hair, so there's that out the window.
But they were asking for people with like years and years of publicly listco experience. And I realized that if every company that goes public gets told the same thing, there's just not that many people out there with that much experience. And so you end up with the same people sitting on a lot of boards, but not for the right reasons. They're sitting on it because they're ticking a box, they're getting well paid, but they don't really care about the growth of the company. In fact, they're actually more likely to push back against anything that you want to do that's innovative and creative, because for them, they want an easy life. And so it's actually quite a negative, quite a dysfunctional setup at the moment, or it certainly has been for the last kind of 100 years. And it's very much tied into, all right, we want people that look a certain way, that have a certain, tick a few boxes. And then we can't risk having anybody else. So we're going to keep bringing people like that in that went to the same universities, and so you end up with this very kind of, very similar looking boards. And what was interesting was that was all driven by investors, and investors saying, well, we need to see that on the board. Then the global financial crisis happened, and what happened was investors lost trillions of dollars. And suddenly they started saying, well, actually, we don't want groupthink anymore. What we want is people on the boards that will challenge the status quo, that come from a different background, that will ask the hard questions. But what was interesting is in that journey through that, I could see how dysfunctional it was, but I very quickly learned how difficult it is to go from a board that you know, like, and trust to adding in that diversity. So where this became very apparent for me, I was the chair of a public listco, UK public listed company, and we'd always had about 50% women on our board, and that was just my personal choice. I don't like pissing contests with men. I find boards with women on much more interesting. I spend time there. So we had some great women on our board, and I met this woman that was talking about diversity on boards, and I kind of went, well, I think we've got that nailed, 50% women. And she was like, yeah, very good. What about your minorities? What about your young people? What about your disabled people? And I went, yeah, good point. But what was interesting then was, and I recognized that, yeah, we had overlooked that. And then, but what I wrestled with was when you're a public, especially when you're a public company, if you hire a board member and they turn out to be a bad hire, you've basically got to, so they're either they do nothing or they're disruptive. You've either got two choices. One is you fire them straight away, which makes the board look incompetent and the share price plummets. Or you live with them, and the average tenure of a PLC board director is 9 years, and they can cause a lot of problems in that time. So you're sort of stuck in this horrendous decision. And so the bigger the company, the more directors are afraid of making the wrong choice. And so they'll stick to what they know. So which is why you end up with these boards, which all look the same. And so I was really wrestling with that. And actually a colleague of mine said to me, well, why don't we set up an apprenticeship? So we basically created an apprenticeship under the board, which allowed us to bring in minorities, disabled people, young people, and give them all of the experience, that much needed board experience. It allowed us to go out to those, there's $20 trillion in ESG investor funds that can't invest in companies that don't have diversity on the board. So we could go out to them and say, look, we're taking steps to be proactive in this. And it was a great opportunity for those people joining the apprentice board to build the relationships, to demonstrate value. And then it's much easier to hire someone that you've worked with for a year and you now trust, without the kind of the risk that came with trying to do the right thing earlier. So it was really, really interesting, and again, sort of led to that's one of the Trojan horses that we use to try and build that trust and get people into boards.
Love it. Some good stuff, that, Callum. Really good stuff. I was just ferociously making notes. So sorry about the silence there, but I was making some really good notes there. So some really, really good tips there. Thanks a lot for that. Now, before we get into coaching mode, no, in fact, let's go straight to coaching mode, because I suppose my last question was all about how to get on boards, but I suppose what we can weave this into the coaching side of stuff, if that's okay with you. But yeah, I mean, this has definitely got my brain ticking for sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of what I call, you've demystified some of the common myths that I have had in my brain. It's probably the same for our listeners as well. So, but yeah, it's been really, really good. So coaching. All right, cool. Let's get into this then. So I'm interested. You got me interested in either creating my own board or getting on, well, more interested in getting on others, because I kind of like see that as a bit of a think tank. Do you know what I mean? Cool. All right. So where should we start? Where should we start with the coaching side of stuff? What do you do? How do you take people through this?
Okay. So generally, like with the Veblen program, we put them into accountability boards. Occasionally I get individual, I don't do one-on-one coaching, but occasionally I get people that are maybe quite high profile and they would like board seats. And then, so then I'll do some one-on-one coaching. And the first thing that I kind of want to nail down with anyone is what's their why for doing this. Like anything in life, you've got to have a strong why, because there's going to be uncomfortable conversations. There's going to be times when it doesn't seem like such a good idea. There's going to be times when it gets tough. So need to make sure that you've got a very strong why of doing it. And look, for some people, that why is just, I want an extra income. For other people, it's really about making an impact. And I think oftentimes when you're a small business owner, you do eventually realize the limitations of being a small business owner. There is a limit to how much impact you can make. And the idea that you could join a bigger company and therefore make more of an impact. So That would be the first thing. But then let's get in, and I'll let you figure out your why in your own time. So let's get into the first piece. What we need to do is get you active board experience. And so what we're not going to do is go on LinkedIn and or go to a job search site and apply for a job. So we have a rule at Veblen is never apply for a board seat, always create one. So what I mean by that is if you've got only less than 1% of companies actually have a board, let's go and look at the others, the other 326 million of them that don't have a board. And let's go and create a board for them. So basically what you're going to do, and I think you probably have a fairly wide range of businesses you could pick from knowing your network, Adam. But you're going to go to a business that you're potentially interested in, and you speak to the owner and say, look, would you be interested in me putting together a board of advisors for you for a year? It's not going to cost you anything. It's going to be super low key, super low stress. We're just going to connect once a month for a coffee for an hour, 90 minutes. I will pull together 4 or 5 really cool people from different industries, different countries, and we'll just have a informal chat every month for the next 12 months. If at the end of that 12 months you feel like this has been great value and you want to make some of us permanent directors, fantastic. If you haven't, no harm, no foul. It'd be a good experience for everyone. Now, that's the kind of pitch that is very hard for an entrepreneur to turn down. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And you've taken the pressure off you, and you've taken the pressure off them by making it very, very low key. The interesting thing about that is when they say yes, your job now is just to go and find 4 or 5 interesting other people that would be interested in getting that board experience. And you might present their profiles to the founder, and the founder will look at those profiles and say, yeah, that'd be great to have someone in South Africa because I'm interested in expanding there, or great to have someone in tech because that's an area that I'm interested in. By default, you're on that board. They're not even going to look at what your credentials are to be on that board. You're just the person putting it together. So that's kind of the way that you Trojan horse your way into getting that first board seat. Now, we kind of talk in Veblen, we talk about, and in the book Boardroom Blueprint that I wrote, talk about 5 things that you really need to have. So one is connections and getting very proactive about your connections. So if you haven't got connections with entrepreneurs, and most entrepreneurs have, then you want to connect with entrepreneurs. You want to start connecting with directors of bigger companies. The second is starting to get awareness of knowledge, sort of what are boards, how do public markets work, what are investors looking for. The third one is profile. So profile is a huge piece insofar as the bigger your profile is, the more opportunities will come to you, which might kind of sound obvious, but when you update your LinkedIn profile and say, I've just joined the board of XYZ company that you've just created this board, it will probably be the most viral post you ever put on LinkedIn. You will just find everyone in your network reaches out and think, oh, congratulations, that's so cool. But you'll probably get a bunch of other opportunities off the back of it. One of our members, Olaf Wemi, joined our program, kind of got this light bulb moment in his first week, and reached out to a non-profit organization that he knew and said, could I set up a board for you? And they said, yeah, that would be amazing. And so he set up a board, announced it on LinkedIn, and immediately another company reached out to him and said, oh, I didn't know you did that sort of thing. Would you sit on the board for us as well? So like within a week, he was on the boards of 2 companies. So it's really interesting. Wow. the way it happens once people see you in a different light, especially less so for you as with your background, Adam, but if someone's an employee, they often get pigeonholed as being just the marketing bloke or just the IT woman or just like whatever. And so when people see you sitting on the board of another company, that just the credibility and the way people view you is huge. So those are the first three. The next one is value, and this is how you add value. So obviously you're with what I've just told you, you can go, okay, well, I could definitely go and set up a board for someone else. And then you get to the first meeting and go, now, now what do I do? So we don't want to be a useless board member. There's enough of them out there. We want to be a good board member. And so you've got to figure out what's the value that you can add along the way. And it's different, but it's very rarely what you've been trained in. So we tend to think, well, yeah, I've had 20 years in supply chain. I can help them with supply chain. But actually, as a board member, you want to be thinking much more holistically than that. And the ironic thing about advisory boards, which is where you start with, is the best board advisors actually give the least advice. They basically just ask questions more than anything else. You're basically there to hold the founder accountable. Most founders don't have much in the way of accountability. So just saying, hey, look, last month when we talked, you said you were going to approach this company and that you were going to do this. Have you done that? And also helping them to, connecting them to people in your network. It can be hugely valuable. Like one connection you make could completely transform the trajectory of that company. So that's kind of value. And as you go up the ladder, that value proposition changes. And then the final one is leverage. And it's basically that kind of thing. Again, entrepreneurs are quite good at this, is always thinking bigger. So now you've got your foot in the doorway, you've joined this board. And another kind of mantra we have is that the board you join is not your final board. It's just a stepping stone. So don't get hung up on this first board. It could be the worst company ever. It doesn't matter. It's just about getting you on the ladder. But now you want to leverage that. Now you're a board member. You can now start talking to other companies. And so you can leverage it by growing that company, because your worth is directly tangential to the market cap of the company. So you either have to bounce sideways and diagonally up to bigger and bigger companies, or you take a company up if you can do that. And by the way, this can be hugely lucrative. So I did a webinar about this, and a gentleman in Atlanta reached out to me, and he said, look, this sounds amazing, but I'm a retired entrepreneur. I'm 70 years old. I think I'm probably a bit too old for this. And I said, well, if you're an entrepreneur, I'm sure like you could add value. So what he did, he joined 3 advisory boards of startups, early stage businesses, 2 of which were in Europe, I think. Went to the first meeting, did the first meeting, said, look, I'm happy to do this an hour a month for the next 12 months. But if I can help you go from here to here in revenue, would it be worth X% of your company and a slice of the revenue that I bring in? And to the founder of that company, it was a food and beverage company in Switzerland. The founder was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as entrepreneurs, lots of people promise you lots of stuff. So it's very easy to say yes to a slice of something in the future. And
Sure.
what Keith then did was he said, great, inked the deal, called up his best mate from school who happens to run a big F&B business in the US, and says, hey, I've just found you a European distributor. And the guy was like, great, let's do the deal. And so immediately just put those 2 pieces together, and it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to him, possibly even more. So it's these things can these free roles can get very lucrative very quickly once you kind of join the dots.
Very interesting. Wanted to share a couple of thoughts actually as you were talking. There were some great pointers there. Love those 5 pointers. The first one was when it comes to proposing that you say for example, I was proposing to put a board together for a company or whatever it is. Is there certain criteria that I need to, or for listeners or whatever it is, that I need to look for? Is there, like, for example, a minimum amount of turnover for a board of advisors to really contribute and add value in a significant way? Is there a set of criteria that you would advise?
No, I actually go the other way. So right now, I'm in the middle of setting up another company. It's a network of investors. Before I sign my first client, before I uh, do anything really, I find my board of advisors. I reach out to two or three people that know this space, and I say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Would you be on my board of advisors for this? Like, I'm not going to pay you. Yeah, if it works out, great. We might do something in the future, but yeah, once a month, would you be up for a quick chat? And I know that that will save me so much time and effort down the road, because they're going to look at things in a different way from me. They're going to challenge my preconceptions, my ideas, and it's super valuable. So I don't think it's ever too early to bring in a board of advisors. And from your perspective, you might think, well, look, do I really want to be a board of advisors on a one-man band? Remember this idea, it's just a stepping stone. It's just to get you on that. It's just so you can update your LinkedIn profile and say, I'm now on the board of this company. Because no other people don't know. They just go, cool, he's sitting on the board of a company. He must be cool.
That's interesting. It's interesting. What I was going to say to you, off our last call, actually, we had a few weeks ago, I think it was about 2 or 3 days after that, I had a call came in, and it was through one of our partners, and they're like, hey, so I wanted to bounce an idea off you. I went, okay. He goes, we've just had a business that has that's based in, I think, in India. I can't remember. But anyway, they're like, they want to expand into like a different market, different global markets in Europe and stuff. And I'm thinking about putting together a board of directors. Are you interested by any chance? I'm like, is this like deja vu or something? I'm like, seriously, I wanted to share that with you. And I knew it would put a smile on your face, but it was just kind of like, okay, that's just weird.
It does start happening. It's that kind of reticular activating system, isn't it? Like, you start seeing these opportunities absolutely everywhere. And one thing I would say to everyone is, do think globally. Like, really do think internationally, because just law of numbers, there's way more companies outside of your country than in your country. But also, you might, to a local company, you're kind of similar to everybody else that they're looking at. Whereas when you're sitting in a different country, you're exotic, you're different, you have a different way of looking at things, you have different experiences. So you can add value just by being a foreigner, which is really interesting as well.
Interesting. In terms of, you mentioned the word lucrative, right? You mentioned about being on a board is very lucrative, and you talked about, and I love the fact that you talked about opportunity and profile and things. Like, if someone approached you or they approached me and they're like, hey, so I want you to be able to sit on our board of advisors, how much is it going to cost me? How do you respond to a question like that? Because to me, that's just completely like, I kind of like, my left brain and my right brain says to me, okay, what do? You charge per hour? You charge based on value? How do you like get around that, like without kind of having, should we say, a money mindset issue? Because I certainly don't have that. But how do you get around that, suppose, thought process in your mind?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways I handle that. Firstly, when we were talking about getting your first board seat, you're setting it up for free. What you're really doing is you're setting it up for experience and contacts. It's very different if somebody approaches you. So I fairly often, just the nature of what I do, people reach out and say, would you sit on our board? A simple way that I can find out whether they're thinking about this as a freebie or whether it's a paid position is I just send a note back saying, what are you thinking around the commercials? And then it kind of puts it back to them that I'm thinking about commercials. So what are they thinking about commercials? For the most part now in my world, I don't, if it's a small company, I'll just put them into the Veblen network, and they can find other people that are better for it. Most of the time, I would rather tie my compensation to the results that I know I can get for them. And so just like Keith Cantor did with his, look, if I can do this for you, is it worth this? It's actually a much easier conversation to have. So another of our clients joined a fintech company in London, set up the board for them, and said, "Look, happy to do this for a year for free, but at the end of that year, if I've added value, then I'd expect about £50,000 a year to carry on in this role." And again, like for entrepreneurs, promising something a year away is fine. Like a year will never come around. That's that's easy to promise. So yeah, and then you commit to that, and then it's on you to build the value so that it's a no-brainer for them to carry on with that. The only way, like, there's been a couple of companies, bigger companies, and I knew they definitely had budget for a director, and so I didn't particularly want the roles, so I just put a very high salary, and if they say yes, that's great, and if they say no, that's great as well. So there's a few ways you can deal with it. I guess because I'm an entrepreneur, I like tying things to results, which ultimately is more lucrative anyway.
Yep, absolutely. Some good stuff. That's some really good stuff. Now, I know we're coming towards the end of our conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. This has been a great conversation, by the way, ladies and gents. I don't know about you, but I mean, he's dropped so many great stuff that honestly, this is like probably been the best hour of my time over the last, I don't know, since the beginning of the year, purely because it's just new stuff that I'm learning. So this is great, Callum. It's great stuff. Tell us a little bit about the, the Boardroom Blueprint. What's it all about? What is the Boardroom Blueprint? How is it different from your books? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so the Veblen Director Program was a program I set up 18 months ago, and so I set that up. It was based on that kind of experience of the apprentice program on boards, and so I set it up for women and minorities, and I said, look, I will help train women and minorities to get their first board seats. And the first 7 people that applied were men, and 4 of them were white, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about that space. But what I realized very quickly is look, if you think globally, which was kind of part of my premise, everyone's a minority somewhere. And so I kind of shifted it to first-time board members. Let's give you the training and let's give you the community. And I had kind of some rough ideas. And then we've now got around 150 people that have been accepted into the program that are all sitting on boards and doing crazy stuff, getting amazing board roles, far better board roles than I ever get offered. So that's been great. And then, so yeah, at the beginning of this year, I released a book, Boardroom Blueprint, which was really kind of taking my initial idea and building on the success that I've seen with my clients, like the challenges and the wins that they've had, and condensing it all into a book. So yeah, it's a very light read because I steer far away from corporate governance and boring stuff like that, and focus more on the actual practical things. And I've had so many people, I mean, almost every day, certainly 2 or 3 times a week, I'll get an email from somebody that says, hey, look, I read your book, I reached out to a company, I now sit on their board, nice. Paid board seats doing this, which is just awesome. So yeah, love that.
Very good. Love it. Some good stuff. Well, first of all, this has been a great conversation. I hope you've enjoyed. For you guys that are listening, I hope it's been a real value. Callum, I just wanted to say this has been a great conversation. I just want to say thank you so much, first of all. For you guys, by the way, if you haven't checked out Callum's books, make sure that you go over onto Amazon or on any should we say, publishing.
Yeah, if you go to Boardroom, boardroom-blueprint.com, at the moment you can download it for free. So do that. Bezos doesn't need any extra cash. So.
Yeah, listen, guys, we all love freebies. I mean, if that's not an excuse not to go read Callum's book, then I don't know what Emma's going to give you to get you to go do that. But listen, that's a great gift, and I just want to say thanks for that. Really greatly appreciate it. We love freebies on this show, so thanks a lot, Callum. Listen, this has been a real, I suppose, eye-opener. I think that's a really good way to summarize today's conversation. Is it's been a real eye-opener. It's certainly something that I have never, ever considered looking at. I mean, there's so many great opportunities. There's management and acquisitions. There's so much that's coming out of the woodworm right now. But tell you what, honestly, you've given me a real food for thought here, Callum. You really have. So listen, thanks very much. I really greatly appreciate it, and hope you've enjoyed today's show as well.
Definitely, yeah, it has. It's always fun to chat to other entrepreneurs about this space.
Absolutely. Listen, guys, hope you've enjoyed today's show. Make sure that you go down, follow Callum Overlearn on LinkedIn specifically. Go check out and download his free book. Okay, we'll put the links below in the description notes, of course. And make sure that if you do reach out to Callum or have any questions around getting onto boards, creating your own boards, mention the podcast. He'll be able to put 2 and 2 together. And I'm sure that him or one of the team will be able to reach out to you in due time. Anyway, from me and Callum, thank you so much. And we'll speak to you soon. Take care. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.